Yamunatira Banachari Yamunatira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chandra Vallabha Giribharatari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Gopi Chandra Vallabha Giribharatari Gopi Chandra Vallabha Giribharatari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Yamunatira Banachari Yamunatira Yamunatira Banachari Yamunatira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Astor Tarasata Shri Shri Madhis Divine Grace of High Charanada Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki ISKCON BBD Founder Acharya save the whole world Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Astor Tarasata Shri Shri Madhis Divine Grace of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Namacharya Shri Rastakur Ki Premsaka Ho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Sadhguru Bhaktivinoda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Go Govanath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Braj Bhumi Shivandama Dama Ki Navdeep Mayapur Dama Ki Purushtam Chatra Jagannathpur Dama Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Maharani Ki Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Nitai Go Premanandi. All glories to some glorious. All glories to some glorious. All glories to some glorious. All glories, Lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Garanga. All glories to Prabhupada Ki Jai. Vishnu Vinay. Krishna Sabbath. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Gopai Make Pratihate Vraja Viplavaya Gopai Make Prahiyate Vraja Viplavaya Gopai Make Pratihate Vraja Viplavaya Deve Abhivashati Pashun Kripaya Rirakshu Deve Birvashati Pashun Kripaya Rirakshu Deve Birvashati Pashun Kripaya Rirakshu Gopayamake pratihate Raja Viplavaya Deve Vivashati Pashun Kripaya Rirakshu Dato Chilindram Iva Sapta Dinani Sapta Dato Chilindram Iva Sapta Dinani Sapta Dato Chilindram Iva Sapta Dinani Sapta Vasho Mahindram Anagaika Kare Shalilam Vasho Mahindram Anagaika Kare Shalilam Vasho Mahindram Anagaika Kare Shalilam Dato Chilindram Iva Sapta Dinani Sapta Vasho Mahindram Anagaika Kare Shalilam Gopayamake Pratihate Raja Viplavaya Deve Vivashati Pashun Kripaya Rirakshu Dato Chilindram Iva Sapta Dinani Sapta Vasho Mahindram Managaika Kare Shililam Gopayamake Prahitate Raja Viplavaya Deve Vivashati Pashun Kripaya Rirakshu Dato Chilindram Iva Sapta Dinani Sapta Vasho Mahindram Anagaika Kare Shalilam Vaishnavis. by the cowherd men. Make, in offering a sacrifice to the King of Heaven. Pratihate, being hampered. Raja Viplavaya, for devastating the whole existence of Brajabhumi, the land of Krishna's pastimes. Deve, by the King of Heaven. Abhivarshati, having poured down heavy rain. Pashun, the animals. Kripaya, by causeless mercy upon them. Virakshu, desiring to protect them. Dharta, held up. Uchilindram, uprooted as an umbrella. Eva, exactly like that. Saptadinani, continuously for 7 days. Saptavarsha, although he was only 7 years old. Mahidram, the Govardhan hill. Anaga, without being tired. Ekakare, in one hand only. Salilam, playfully. Translation. When the cowherd men of Vrindavan, under instructions of Krishna, stopped offering sacrifice to the heavenly king Indra, the whole tract of land known as Vraja was threatened with being washed away by constant heavy rains for 7 days. Lord Krishna, out of his causeless mercy upon the inhabitants of Vraja, held up the hill known as Govardhan with one hand only, although he was only 7 years old. He did this to protect the animals from the onslaught of water. Responsively, when the cowherd men of Vrindavan, under instruction of Krishna, stopped offering sacrifice to the heavenly king Indra, the whole tract of land known as Vraja was threatened with being washed away by constant heavy rains for 7 days. Lord Krishna, out of his causeless mercy upon the inhabitants of Vraja, held up the hill known as Govardhan with one hand only, although he was only 7 years old. He did this to protect the animals from the onslaught of water. It's very, we just discussed this a few days ago, I guess it was now, I think it was, last week, this wonderful pastime of Krishna's lifting Govardhan Hill and the reasons why he did this. So now we see Brahma is again talking about this quite extraordinary pastime. And I'll read the purport. Children play with an umbrella, generally known as a frog's umbrella, and Lord Krishna, when he was only 7 years old, could snatch the great hill known as Govardhan Parvat at Vrindavan and hold it for 7 days continuously with one hand, just to protect the animals and the inhabitants of Vrindavan from the wrath of Indra, the heavenly king, who had been denied sacrificial offerings by the inhabitants of Brajabhumi. We all know what a frog's umbrella is, right? A mushroom or a toadstool. So you can imagine like holding something, how much effort would it take to pull that out of the ground and hold it up? Huh? Not much, yeah? And so that's what it was like for Krishna lifting this mountain. And right now this mountain is 22 kilometers around, but before it was a lot bigger than that. It's said that it shrinks the size of a mustard or a sesame seed each day. So you go back 5,000 years, how many days is that? That's about, what, 5,000, that's 15,000, 150,000, about 1.5 million mustard seeds, give or take a bit. So it shrunk that much in that time. So it would have been a lot bigger. And actually it's described how when Govardhan, before Govardhan was cursed, the sun god, when he was circumambulating the universe on his chariot, he would stop on his chariot so his horses could eat the grass on top of Govardhan Hill because it was particularly sweet. So at one time it was a very, very big mountain. And Krishna lifted this up and just held it aloft with a little pinky of his left hand for 7 days. And Prabhupada actually Brahma's using this analogy here, just like a frog's umbrella. It was just like play for him. It was nothing. And he uses the word here, shalilam, playfully. It was just play. There's no challenge for Krishna whatsoever to do things like this. And we see all these, and this section here in the 7th chapter, now Brahma is describing Krishna's pastimes in and around Braj, but previously he was describing other pastimes, even the pastime of Trivikram, Urukram, how he, Vamana, how he expanded and covered the entire creation with 2 steps of land, 2 steps by his legs. So we can see how powerful he is, how great he is, and for him it is nothing to do this. You can imagine, if I took this cup, right, and this cup doesn't weigh much, right, maybe, I don't know, 10 ounces, something like that, maybe 6 ounces. Do you think I could hold this above my head for 7 days with my left hand? I probably couldn't do it for 7 minutes without my arm hurting. But Krishna held a mountain which would weigh millions of tons above his head for 7 days as if it was nothing. So, we see that Brahma, he's describing these things to Narad Muni just to give him some kind of a snapshot, because it's all done in a very sort of brief way, but just to give him some sort of snapshot of who it is he's talking about. The previous chapter was Purusha Sukta confirmed. Purusha Sukta discusses the Sahasra Shirasha Purushaha Sahasraksha Sahasprat, the 1,000-headed Purusha. Yeah? It talks about the Purusha with many thousands of forms. So it talks about the Lord in his form as the creator, as the Purusha, the Purusha avatar. And so now he's talking more about, he's talked about the creator. Now he's talking about Krishna's different pastimes, and he's talked about Lila avatars and Manvantara avatars and all these different avatars. And now he's talking about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, just to give Narada an understanding of who it is he's talking about and how great this personality is. And now he's talking about, he's lifting this mighty mountain and holding it for 7 days like it's just play. And there's, if you look in Greek mythology and things like that, you see like there's this I think the guy's name is Atlas, who held the universe up. And you see like, I can't remember, there's 2 pillars that he's standing on, and I can't remember the name of the pillars in that. I used to know this stuff when I was a kid. And he's holding the world up on his back, and he's really straining. Like his muscles are bulging, he's sweating. It's a big effort for him. But for Krishna, it's like in his form of Anantashesh, he's got all the universes on one of his hoods, and he doesn't even know they're there. It's so insignificant for him. It's just like a mustard seed sitting on the back of an elephant. Doesn't even know it's there. And this is Krishna. And so Brahma is explaining this to Narad so he can get an understanding of who this personality Krishna is and how powerful he is. And yet we see that even though he's the all-powerful Supreme Personality of Godhead, what does he do? He engages in childhood pastimes in Vrindavan, playing with the cows, playing with his friends, doing naughty little boy things. This is God. And so it's very difficult for, Brahma mentions that later on this chapter, it's very difficult for non-devotees to understand this. For someone who's not interested in cultivating bhakti, who's not interested in controlling the mind and senses and practicing the activities of devotional service, they find it very difficult to understand this. This is your God. And even we see someone like Lord Brahma, he struggled to understand this. He struggled to understand that actually this cowherd boy in Vrindavan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he's engaged in this play in Vrindavan. Why? because he likes it. He likes this exchange with his devotees. And this is an aspect of God that many people struggle to understand. They struggle to sort of grasp the whole idea of how God will sort of manifest or engage in activities like this, which aren't sort of creational type of activities. Like they, many have the idea of God as the creator, God as the destroyer, God as the chastiser, all these types of things. But when it comes to the idea of God just playing with his friends in a rural village in Vrindavan, it's meaningless to them. They can't understand how God would do that. And therefore what happens is they tend to think that he's just an ordinary person. And even we see the residents of Vrindavan, they just think Krishna's one of them. They just think he's a cowherd boy. They just think he's a Brajbasi. They just think he's an ordinary person. But they love him so much. But but they've achieved that position of being residents of Vrindavan by many, many lifetimes of pure devotional service. Yet so when they think of Krishna as being an ordinary person, that's not the same as a non-devotee thinking of Krishna as being an ordinary person. Or we see even with Duryodhana, he thought that Krishna was some kind of magician because he was able to manifest the universal form. But when the materialists, when they see Krishna performing these or they hear about these pastimes, their immediate response is to think, oh, this is just mythology. Someone's made this up. It can't be true. How can a little boy, 7-year-old boy, lift a mountain? Because he's God. He can do anything he likes. And there's nothing there's one time Prabhupada was challenged by someone. This person said to Prabhupada, he said, is your God so great that he can create a mountain so big that he can't lift it? Prabhupada said, yes, of course. And then he will lift it. Because if he couldn't, he wouldn't be God. And if he couldn't lift it, he wouldn't be God. So the nature of Krishna is he's constantly expanding. Everything we see in this material world is limited, it's finite. It means it has its dimension, it has its boundaries. Everything has boundaries in this world. There's nothing in this world, even this universe, as unlimited as it may. Like you look up and, although I don't know if you see many stars at night here, where I live, you look up in the sky at night, and it's just like mind-blowing how many stars you see. And you look up at the stars at night, and it seems unlimited, but it's not, it's finite. You could count them. You could actually count them if you had the time or the equipment, you could count them all. And as we understand, our universe is 4 billion miles across. So it's had a finite size. But Krishna's not like that. God's not like that. He's infinite. There is no limit to his glories. And Brahma talks about that later, that even Sesha's the first expansion, or at least Brahma lists Sesha as being the first expansion of Krishna. He has 1,000 hoods, and with his 1,000 hoods, he's constantly reciting the glories of Krishna, and he still hasn't reached the limit of it. Because there is no limit. It's unlimited. And this is the nature of Krishna, that he's constantly expanding. Even Krishna himself doesn't know the limit of his own glories. He's constantly expanding. And this is why, for a materialistic person, or one of the reasons for a materialistic person, that it's very difficult to understand God, because they have no concept of something that's unlimited. And Srila Prabhupada sometimes would use this analogy of the frog in the well. Dr. Frog, he's living in his well, and he's trying to understand, his friend goes and visits the Pacific Ocean. And I don't know if anyone's sort of flown over the Pacific Ocean, but it's a long way. To fly from Sydney to Los Angeles takes about 17 hours. And it's like, and all you've got under you is water the whole time. So it takes quite a while. And so anyhow, this friend is trying to explain to Dr. Frog the size of the Pacific Ocean, and he's trying to understand it in terms of his well. And he's saying, is it as big as my well? He says, oh, it's so much bigger than this, And he's trying to, but he can't understand it because his whole worldview is related to the things he knows. And he can't, it's like this idea of Atmavan Mandate Jagat. As I think, that's the way everything is. according to my vision. Everything's like that. But if we try to use that kind of reasoning or worldview to understand God, we never will understand, because God's beyond everything we know. There's no limit. Everything we know has a limit. Actually, there's one interesting statement that Albert Einstein made. He said that there's two things that are unlimited: the universe and human stupidity. But I'm not sure about the universe. I thought that was quite interesting. So we can see that one thing that is unlimited is human stupidity. Humans do pretty stupid things. But we see, within our realm of knowledge, that everything has its limit. Everything is finite. Even you might be the richest man in the world, but you still have a finite amount of money. You may be the strongest man in the world, but you still have a finite amount of strength. All these things are limited, but in God they're unlimited. He possesses unlimited beauty, strength, knowledge, wisdom, renunciation. All these things he possesses in unlimited. And so this is the nature of God. And this is what Brahma is trying to explain to Narad through recounting all these different pastimes here. I'll just read the rest of the purport. Factually, there is no need of offering sacrifices to demigods for their services, even if one is engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. Factually, there is no need of offering sacrifices to demigods for their services if one is engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. There's a nice verse in the 10th canto, I think. There's Devarshi Bhutapta Ninam Prijinam, where it's explaining that for one who's engaged in the service of Krishna, you have no indebtedness to the devas, the rishis, the forefathers. Sacrifices recommended in the Vedic literature are for the satisfaction of the demigods. Sacrifices recommended in the Vedic literature for the satisfaction of the demigods are a sort of an inducement to the sacrifices to realize the existence of higher authorities. The demigods are engaged by the Lord as controlling deities of material affairs. And according to the Bhagavad Gita, when a demigod is worshipped, the process is accepted as the indirect method for worshipping the Supreme Lord. But when the Supreme Lord is worshipped directly, there is no need of worshipping the demigods or offering them sacrifices as recommended in particular circumstances. Lord Krishna therefore advised the inhabitants of Brajabhumi not to offer any sacrifices to the heavenly king Indra. But Indra, not knowing Lord Krishna in Brajbhumi, was angry at the inhabitants of Brajbhumi and tried to avenge the offense. But competent as the Lord was, he saved the inhabitants and animals of Brajbhumi by his personal energy and proved definitely that anyone directly engaged as a devotee of the Supreme Lord need not satisfy any other demigods, however great, even to the level of Brahma or Shiva. Thus, this incident definitely proved that without a doubt that Lord Krishna is the personality of Godhead, and that he was so in all circumstances, as a child on the lap of his mother, as a boy 7 years old, and as an old man of 125 years of age. In either case, he was never on the level of an ordinary man, and even in his advanced age, he appeared as a young boy, 16 years old. These are the particular features of the transcendental body of the Lord. So you see here Prabhupada's describing that it doesn't matter what situation Krishna appears in. And we see there's so many, he appears in so many different species of life. And actually Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto, when he's glorifying Nrsimhadev, he says, you appear in all species of life. So there's, as we know, there's 8,400,000 species of life, and Krishna appears in every one of them. And even though he may appear as an ant incarnation or a worm incarnation or whatever, he's still the Supreme Person of Godhead, and he's fully capable of performing wonderful activities in any of these situations. He's not, we are very much limited by our body, just like we see, you have a baby, who's not even crawling yet. What can they do? They just lie there, they cry, they eat, they pass stool, that's about it. They can't do anything beyond that because they're confined by that body. They're imprisoned in that body, and they can't do anything beyond that. And we see as we grow, we get into our childhood years. we're limited by that body. And also we see, okay, when we're in youth, we may have some strength, maybe have some agility, whatever. But then you'll find that as you get older, especially Prabhupada's talking about here how Krishna, he was a 125-year-old man, but he didn't have an old man body. And you'll find as you get older, your capacity to do things is less and less. Your capacity to, expend energy is less and less. And one of the things I'm finding is as I get older, I need to sleep more. It's just because you're so tired all the time. But we see that Krishna, he's not limited like that. And this is the nature of a transcendental body. We have a transcendental body, but we're imprisoned in this material body. And the material body causes so many limitations. It has its limitations. And you look at someone who's in an animal body. They can function according to that body. Someone who's in a plant body can only function according to that body. Someone who's in a fish body can only function according to that body. You won't find them doing extraordinary activities. They'll just do fish activities or plant activities. And it's the same with the human body. This body has limitations. You can't flap your arms and fly in the sky because that's not what this body's meant to do. But Krishna, we see, there's that nice verse in the Brahma Samhita, Angani Yasha Sakalendriya Brittimanti, that because his body is fully transcendental, all the senses of his body can perform any function that he wants them to. So it's just like, on the altar, they offer food to the deity. They ring the bell, they chant the mantra, and Krishna hears the mantra. He eats by hearing. He doesn't have to get down and sit down and physically eat it. He can, and he does sometimes. There's many wonderful stories of how Krishna in the deity form has sat down and eaten the offerings. But just by seeing, just by hearing, he can also eat. He doesn't need to physically get down. So this is the nature of Krishna, that in whatever form he appears, whether it's a plant form or an animal form or whatever, human form, doesn't matter. He's still the original Supreme Personality of Godhead and fully capable of acting in many, many amazing ways. Just like we see, that there's, so many extraordinary pastimes, like when he appeared as Lord Boar. And he appeared in that form so he could go down into the nether regions of the Garbhodak Ocean and pick up the earth out because in the bottom of the Garbhodak Ocean, it's like all the universal rubbish is down there. It's just like you go into any lake or whatever. I'm sure when the pond here gets drained, you'll see there's all sorts of gunk down the bottom. So the earth was down in that gunk. And what better form to go into that gunk? Anyone here who's been in Vrindavan will notice that the pigs don't mind getting in the drains and gutters and things like that. They don't mind that sort of stuff. So Krishna took a form that was just suitable to that. And he picked up the earth. But he was still, even though he was in the form of a boar, he was still the original personality of Godhead. He was not limited by that form. And this is for someone who's not trying to cultivate this understanding of the nature of Krishna or the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that they'll never understand, they'll never accept that Krishna can appear in these forms. They have this stereotypical idea, God is an old man, he sits on a big throne and he sort of, casts people into hell and sends people back to heaven and stuff like that. That's their kind of like very limited view of God. But it's so limited. God can do anything. There's nothing he can't do. As I mentioned that story of Prabhupada, he'll create a mountain so big he can't be lifted, and then he'll lift it. He can do anything. But as soon as we try to understand God through our mundane intelligence, through our mundane senses, you just can't do it because it's just our intelligence is so finite. And how can you understand the infinite with this? It's only through Shastra and through the association of saintly souls that we can actually understand things that are beyond us. It's just like, on, what was it, what day was it? It was Prabhupada's disappearance day? Last Wednesday? Friday, was it? Friday. So for me, it's always a day of introspection and reflection, because if you sort of like hit the rewind button and go back to before we heard about Prabhupada, before we knew about Bhagavad Gita, before we knew about Krishna, and think of what was our perception of the self? What was our perception of this world, this universe? And did we have any perception of God? It was very, very limited. It was actually very, very, self-centered. It was based around our view of everything. But, Srila Prabhupada, by the tremendous effort he made to, translate these transcendental literatures and to spread these literatures all around the world, by his great effort, we now have the wonderful opportunity to discover who Krishna is. And it's, not only, there's an interesting book the BBT put out called, I think it's like Lectures and Things of Prabhupada, The Journey of Self-Discovery. So there's that aspect, but there's also the journey of discovering God. Because along with discovering yourself, you also discover who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. And there's that nice verse in the Bhagavatam, this Krishna Surya Samamaya, no, what is it? Not that one. Well, that's actually the CC, the same sort of thing. Krishna Surya Samamaya Hayandaka, Yahan Krishna Tahanai Mahiyarika. The one I was thinking about is Krishna Swadama Bhagavad Dhamagana Visa, Kalonashti Samaste, Puranako. This Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun. This Krishna Swadama Bhagavad. So it's just like, when it's really, really dark at night, when there's no moon, and it's really dark, you can't see anything. Especially when, when you go into outback Australia, there's nothing. For thousands of kilometres, there's nothing. There's one highway there that goes from Perth to the centre of Australia. It's called the Gun Barrel Highway because it's dead straight for about 800 kilometres. There's not a turn or anything. And, you can go on that highway and you might see a car every 2 or 3 days. It's like, it's just so isolated out there. I mean, Australia's probably about, 50, maybe 150 times the size of England. And there's 27 million people in it. So there's, and most of them are on the East Coast. And so there's not many people there. And so, you can go out there in the outback on a dark night and you can't see anything. You put your hand in front of your face, you can't even see it, it's so dark. But then as the sun comes up, you start to see some shapes. Then you start to see the self and you start to see everything around you. So the Bhagavatam's like that. It's like the sun rising. And when the sun of the Bhagavatam rises, is you start to understand who you really are. That actually I'm not this material body, as we've been thinking for so many lifetimes. We've been thinking that this is me, this is my way of enjoying, this is my way of experiencing the world. We start to understand that this is not me, actually. This is just a machine. As Krishna, he says, Yantra Rudrani Maya, it's just a machine. And through understanding this knowledge of the Bhagavatam, we understand the self, we understand this universe, we understand this world, and we start to understand the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is what Brahma is doing here, is he's giving Narada a synopsis of the universe. He's giving him a synopsis of the science of Krishna consciousness. And then he says, now take it and expand it throughout the universe. Because as we know, Narada has a very, very unique service in that he's kind of the original Parivrajacharya. He travels around the universe without limitation and inspires people in Krishna consciousness. And sometimes he does it in most amazing ways. I mean, some of the stories, there's that story about Pracharabhahishat, how he became bewildered. Pracharabhahishat means he does so many sacrifices. There's kusha grass spread all over the world. So he was doing all these materialistic sacrifices, and he got a little bit bewildered. But then Narada told him this wonderful allegorical story, which helped him to understand that he'd kind of lost the plot a little bit. And you'll see that Narada, he's very, very active like that. And this is based on the instructions he received from his father, Brahma. He gave him the synopsis of this philosophy. They said, now expand it and spread it. And that's what we see in the Bhagavatam. Even we see in the I forgot what chapter is in the previous canto, isn't it? The Chatusloki? I think. I can't remember the number of the verses anyway. But it talks about, it gives you like the essence of the Bhagavatam, and the whole thing comes from that. The whole thing's expanded out from that. And so we see like here, Brahma is giving Narada a synopsis, and then he, through realization, he understands what he's explaining and expands. And so that's kind of a very, very nice story. And I think this is the last chapter where, and then from there it goes on to Pariksit. So, there's this whole first 7 chapters of this canto is about Brahma, and Brahma explaining the science of Krishna consciousness to Narada. And then he asks him to understand it, expand it, and spread it around the universe. Okay, I'll finish there. Any questions or comments at all, please? Yes, bro.
Krishna tells Nanda Maharaj, his father, not to perform.
That's interesting.
Sorry, not to perform this sacrificial, telling him to stop. But Nanda Maharaj doesn't want to stop. To my understanding, Nanda Maharaj and all the inhabitants of Raja are very special souls. Why they perform that? Because they think that they need the water, the rain. Why Krishna tells Nanda Maharaj the rain comes anyway.
Yeah.
It comes to the ocean, it comes to the land, it goes to the ocean, it doesn't need that. My question to that is, because I'm assuming they're highly exalted souls, why do they perform this sacrificial
Yeah.
thing? Because Srila Prabhupada says you don't need to worship demons. So these are highly exalted beings. Why do they do that? Why do they need to perform that sacrificial while Krishna tells us? Yeah, you really have to convince.
Yeah. It's kind of similar to Arjuna's illusion on the Bala Kurukshetra. I mean, Arjuna is an eternal associate of Krishna. He's always with Krishna. And Krishna says, he says, many, many births both you and I have taken together. I remember them, you do not. So, Arjuna is Krishna's eternal associate, but for the purpose of speaking Bhagavad Gita, Krishna puts Arjuna into illusion. So in the same way, for the purpose of performing pastimes, and for the purpose of chastising Indra, for the purpose of explaining to the devotees, us included, not to worship anyone but Krishna, then Krishna performs these pastimes. But if Nanda Maharaj wasn't, convinced that they had to serve Indra, then how would this pastime come about? How would this play? Or it's like, these kind of, I guess, like opposing elements. How would they be there if Krishna's Lila Shakti hadn't arranged it like that? So, in order to perform these wonderful pastimes, because they're all eternal associates. They're always, Nanda Maharaj is always Krishna's father. Yasodamai is always Krishna's father. So, in order to arrange these wonderful pastimes, then these scenarios are created by the Lord's energies, Yoga Maya, etc. It's really just about the pastime.
It seems though a condition that although they are quite advanced,
Yeah. Yeah.
if we do the sacrifice, we get the rain, but
Yeah, it looks like that externally And that's why for us the commentaries of the Acharyas are so important, because if we just see these things and try to understand them with our conditioned consciousness, we'll just see, oh, it's just an ordinary mundane person. But when we understand these things through the commentaries of the Acharyas, we can see these are eternally liberated souls, Nityasiddha devotees who are eternal associates of Krishna. Therefore, we can understand these are, by Krishna's, the arrangement of Krishna's internal potencies, these pastimes occur. Just to, because you see, like what happened. Krishna lifted this mountain for 7 days. And what happened was because all the residents of Vrindavan wanted to spend time with Krishna, but they couldn't because he was out herding the cows all day long. Because when he was a child, because yesterday was Gopastami. So Gopastami, two significant things happened on Gopastami. First off is Krishna went out to herd the calves. And then several years later he went out to herd the cows when he was, I think, 6 years old, 5, 6 years old. So once he started, because before he was herding the calves, they got to see him every day. He was with them every day. And they're so attached to Krishna. Like the kind of attachment the residents of Vrindavan have for Krishna, we cannot understand in our conditioned state. He is the center of their lives. He is everything for them. More dear to them than their own breath. More dear to them than their own life. And so when Krishna is going out to herd the cows, they feel so much separation from him. So they all had this longing that they just wanted to be with Krishna always. And so he lifted the hill, and it was like, and I gave class in London on Govardhan Puja, and it's describing, in Australia, in Perth, Perth's like the most isolated city in the world. It's like 3,700 kilometers from the nearest city. It's way out there on the edge of the desert. And Burijan Prabhu and Jagatarini live in Perth, and they have this project there called, I think it's called Govinda Dham. Anyhow, so Jagatarini's created all these miniatures, like of Krishna's pastimes. She carved all these like tiny little figures, all the devotees, the cowherds, the gopis, the gopas, the whole thing, cows. And so she's created this scene of Govardhan, underneath Govardhan, what it was like when Krishna, and this is all based on descriptions from Shastra, Garga, Samhita, and things like that. And the scene under Govardhan Hill, when Krishna was holding Govardhan Hill, is extraordinary. It's just so opulent. This is like because you're kind of expecting when Krishna's going to lift Govardhan Hill up, there's going to be all these rocks and roots and water dripping down and stuff like that, But he's created this whole amazing scene. And it's also described how like, the whole period that the residents of Vrindavan were under there, they felt no fatigue, they felt no hunger, they felt no thirst. They're just there with Krishna and just relishing these exchanges with Krishna for 7 days. So he created that situation so he could satisfy that desire of the residents of Vrindavan to be with him. Also, Indra was thinking he was something special. He was thinking he was very, very important. So he showed Indra that he was very, very insignificant. Very insignificant. Like he's throwing down these thunderbolts, he's got the Samvataka clouds coming and it's just pouring down rain. It's like, we have no concept of how much rain was coming down. It was like coming down, it was like the columns of rain were as big as elephants. It was just pouring down rain. And it said the thunderbolts were like elephant trunks. And so just by this little playful act of lifting up this mountain like a little toadstool sort of thing, he just humbled Indra. And then also, to teach us that actually our devotion should exclusively be for Krishna, for no one else. So in order to perform these different pastimes, then Nanda Maharaj had to, go through this whole thing of doing the Indriya Yoga. And it was a tradition, he said it's a tradition, and we've done this for generations. So all this comes about in order to have these wonderful pastimes so we can sit here and talk about it. It's mostly about pastimes. Sweet exchanges with the devotees and things like that. Yes, Hare Krishna. I don't think the microphones have much use. Ah, they can hear it outside, okay. Yeah. Why? Why would they be different? I mean, Krishna's there with the cows, he's there with the gopas and the gopis, it's the same. Because, see, Krishna has this two-handed form, this beautiful threefold bending form, as you see here, Gokulananda on the altar. This is what Krishna looks like. And everything expands from Krishna. He says, Aham Savasya Prabhu Matasa, that I'm the source of all material worlds. Everything comes from me. So it means that all human beings are going to have a form somewhat similar, because ultimately they're coming from Krishna. And the cows that they're in the spiritual world, they're Sarabhi cows. They're the original cows. So everywhere in the universe you're going to have cows that look something like that.
Oh, really?
Everything comes from Krishna. It's not like, it's not like some science fiction movie where you see people with like, chicken wing legs coming out the side of their head and stuff like that, It's not like a science fiction movie. That's just, usually that comes from someone who's taking too many drugs. The mind sort of gets a little bit sort of agitated. But, the same kind of play will be going on all throughout the universe. It may be with different personalities. It's just like later on here in this chapter, it describes how when Lord Lord Buddha comes, he comes as a transcendental spaceman because Kali Yuga is much more advanced. So that's in the Kali Yugas where you haven't had Krishna's pastimes, because Krishna descends once in a day of Brahma. So it says in the Gita, Sahasra Yuga Pariyanta Mahad Brahmana. So there's 1,000 ages in one day of Brahma. So Krishna only appears once in a day of Brahma. So then in all these other ages, Kali Yuga advances much more rapidly because you don't have, the religiosity is not as strong in those ages as it is in this age. And especially in this age, we have the advent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it's slowed all that materialism down. So there will be variations in the pastimes. And there will be, it's not that Jai and Vijay, for instance, not they always come as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Sometimes it's different personalities. But Krishna comes and these pastimes just go on and on and on. It's just, Prabhupada describes, the scriptures describe how it's like the waves in a river. If you go down and see a river, when the wind's blowing, you just see one wave after the next, after the next, after the next. They don't stop. They just keep coming. And so Krishna's pastimes are like that. And that's in this universe, but also in other universes. And there's unlimited universes. So that there's similarities, but there's also every pastime is unique because he's unlimited. And the sense of being unlimited, or the definition of being unlimited, means that it's always changing. It's always variety there. There's unlimited variety in Krishna's pastimes. The same things may be happening, like he's lifting Govardhan Hill, but it's going to be something different will be going on. Maybe the exchange with Nanda Maharaj will be different, or something like that. It's okay? Okay, thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi.